guess.
The key we never got straight was being able to hear what was being said on the screen when you're back a little way.
Yeah.
We got it where you could hear the people talking in the room here.
So you should be able to hear.
So are we the participant or how?
We're the only participant at the moment.
Okay,
But
it's open. We got in.
Yeah.
But I don't know why what I'm saying isn't coming through the speakers. You're saying that was the only thing you got to work?
Yeah, I could.
When you were here, you could.
The last time we tried it, I was at home and Susan was here.
Yeah.
And she said, I could hear what she said no matter how far back she got.
Okay.
But she could not hear me very far back.
Even with the volume of the TV up?
Yeah. She tried to put every volume up she could come up with.
I know I was here, explaining how to turn volume off.
Yeah.
And instead of keep saying over and over, turn volume off. Turn
Volume.
volume. Just go.
Yeah.
Did you see the portrait?
Yes. I did.
So we're starting.
Yeah, they're actually working.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to call them and say, where are you people? But
Well, I had two good warm days. So at least you can
yeah, it
see.
looks like it's pretty recent. The concrete looks, well, that, it doesn't look well cured.
Well, the concrete was poured last time.
Well, but they poured an
Additional after, okay.
once they got
The post, yeah.
and what they did different, and what I like, is they cut out the 6x6 to put the beam in, instead of doing what we did over there. They put a 4x4 and then put 2x4s
Around there.
on the sides for the joist sitting.
Yeah.
This way, you don't have to worry about separation and bowing. And he talked us into that. So this is good. That'll go right off to there. And that will miss the rocks barely. So,
Yeah.
but I don't think there's steps going on that way. I think we're just going that way. To that part.
Yeah, I hope so.
Which will make this piece of we might think about making a cut around the back.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
But you're not going to be able to get past the porch.
will there be steps?
Yeah.
Like that.
We were just saying, between these two folks, the step will go down that way for people coming around or through their problem.
Yeah, we gotta look at that, hole we've got.
Yeah.
And how we deal with that, when we put a bridge over it, or,
Yeah.
because that's not a wide enough path. People,
Right.
there's always something,
Guard, yeah, do one thing.
yeah, another thing pops up. Oh, you did it.
My mask.
No. That's why you were in the paper again, your latest book, congratulations.
It was headline, my name.
Yes. Oh.
Only someone who did something like it's fascinating would get their name in letters like
With your
that.
middle name in there.
Oh, my God.
I don't think every word middle name. Thank you. Keep shows up here. You may not know me.
You're going to do both.
Well, I'm trying. I have to I have to mute people, so I figured I should have my computer to do that. But I don't know if I can get on this with my computer.
Hell, BC just beat Notre Dame. I was like, even I know that's a really, even if you hadn't yelled, if you just told me BC beat Notre Dame. Oh.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Dave. Did you have your beer for breakfast?
What's that?
Did you have your beer for breakfast?
Oh, yeah, I wish.
Not working third shift, eh?
Yeah. We don't have the volume here. I'm only hearing you through my computer, so I'm not sure what's going on.
You're loud and clear.
Yeah, I need to figure out how to get this TV. I'm going to put you on mute for a bit.
It's on mute right now.
Yeah,
Did you hear that?
I heard that.
I didn't even know you were in there. Do you want to share my computer or you want to do it
No,
yourself?
I want to share.
Your screen is bigger.
Same thing.
Dave can't get the sound up on the TV.
Morning.
Morning, Eddie.
Something's happening here. I don't know what. For some reason, I can't get my,
Eddie, you're on mute. Can we try your sound?
How's that?
Loud and clear.
Good, all right. Is it snowing down there?
The question is, why is mine so low?
Turn up the sound of that. Maybe if we just say about this.
should be coming through here.
Dave, can you hear me?
We can hear, but barely. Even if I turn the volume up on my computer, we're not getting it through the
Your
TV.
screen just said that you were muted.
Yeah, I've unmuted it now. But the problem is it's not coming through the TV at all. All we're seeing is the, it's just the pictures of everybody.
Aren't
The
we pretty?
sound, I'm gonna mute you again. I'm gonna try to turn the sound of the TV up. Maybe it's not.
Dave?
Yes, Susan?
Hey, when I was working on this, the one thing that finally seemed to work was I had to shut everything down and pull it back in a certain order, put them back on in a certain order. And I had to turn off the router and then reboot the router. I hope you don't have to do that, but it's a real strange.
Yeah, currently we're connected through my phone.
Oh,
because,
okay.
Because
Okay,
we couldn't connect through the. Okay, is this?
I can get it on TV.
Okay.
We can watch it on TV.
You don't have the picture.
Really?
Good morning, everyone. I think we'll wait another minute to see if any others join us.
It's Carolyn. I don't know.
All right. Well, welcome and good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Rappahannock on the day before Valentine's Day, a celebration of love. A very special welcome to any first-time visitors. Normally, we would have refreshments after our service and ask you to please stay so we could get to know you better. But because we're doing this on Zoom, we won't be having refreshments together today. We gather this morning in worship to find meaning and live more deeply. Gathering in worship creates connections within, beyond us, calling to our better selves, calling us to live lives with wisdom and compassion. We're extremely grateful to have our pastor, Reverend Susan Mosley, guide us as we try to fulfill our mission. Our members join together to do the work necessary for the fellowship. We are fortunate to have many talented people in our fellowship who are willing to share their experiences, interests, and insights with us on Sunday mornings. Today, we have someone from the fellowship, my dear husband, Eddie Correia, who will speak to us about Jesus. This is part 2 of a 4-part series on great religious leaders. At this time, please silence your cell phones. And if you are joining us on Zoom, please mute yourself and only unmute if you are speaking. This will avoid the distraction of background noise. You can find announcements and events on our website. And I just want to mention one in particular, and that is the vote on the covenant. It was sent to all of you, I believe, around January 25th, and it is due to be returned by February 20th. So if you haven't done that yet, please do take care of that before the 20th of February. And now we will light our chalice. And as we light our chalice today, let us remember that we are part of a great community of faith. And let us also recognize that now more than ever, our nation and our world needs the light of wisdom, compassion, and hope. In our opening words today, I thought I would focus on Valentine's Day because it is tomorrow and love is such an important part of the message of Jesus. Valentine's Day originated, in fact, as a liturgical feast in memory of one or perhaps two Christian martyrs who were decapitated for performing miracles during the reign of Roman Emperor Gothicus. And we know that because Jesuit monks, the Bollandists in medieval times, exhaustively researched the lives of all the saints for the compilation of Lives of the Saints. Medieval legend has it, however, that Saint Valentine performed Christian marriage rituals or passed notes between Christian lovers jailed by Gothicus. These medieval tales have no basis in history.
We're not going to be able to get it on the TV.
Some scholars suggest that the modern Valentine's Day holiday is a Christian cover-up of the ancient Roman celebration of Lupercalia in mid-February. The celebration involved half-naked young men running through the streets of Rome, clad only in thongs cut from the skins of newly killed goats, which was thought to bring pregnant women healthy babies. By 496 ACE, Pope Gelasius supposedly denounced the rowdy festival. Still, there's no evidence that the Pope purposely replaced Lupercalia with the more sedate recognition of the martyred St. Valentine. 1,000 years later, after the martyr's death, the love connection was probably first made by Geoffrey Chaucer, the first English writer to associate romantic love with St. Valentine in his 699-line poem about birds choosing their mates. It is called the Parliament of the Fowls. And now at this point in our service, I'd like us to offer any joys and concerns to the congregation that we would like to either share the difficulty of or lift up for their joy. And if you have a joy or concern to share, please raise your hand and I will call on anyone whose hand is raised, and you can do it either with your computer or just raise your hand. Susan.
Hi, thank you. I have a concern and joy that are blended together. The concern is that Jim, my husband, tested positive for COVID on Friday. And he was sick on Thursday and Friday. He's doing much better now. And though I have obviously been exposed, I still feel fine. So that's my joy. And I just wanted to let you all know I'm not going to be coming back into social contact until I have a negative test. And I'm scheduled to have the molecular test tomorrow. And I should get results by Wednesday, I think. And if it's negative, I'm coming back out. So that's my hope and my joy, and Jim's doing well. Thank you.
Oh, that's great, Susan. Not great that Jim has COVID, but great that he's not doing too badly. We'll wish for a negative test for you. Bill. Bill, you're on mute.
I was just giving a thumbs up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, so you don't have any other joy or concern. It's hard for me to distinguish sometimes the thumbs up and the hand raised. Is there anyone else?
Yes, there's Charlotte. Oh.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
This is Charlotte.
Hello, Charlotte.
I'm trying to figure out how to work this. I've never done it before.
We can hear
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Do you have a joy or concern you'd like to share?
Never worked this before, so I'm trying to figure it out. And
if you have a joy or concern you'd like to share, Charlotte, we'd love to hear it.
Before
We
the
can hear
surgery,
you.
the hospital said you cannot. Hello?
Hi, Charlotte. I think your connection is not great because you're breaking up.
Right. We have satellite, so that's probably true.
Yes. Is there anything you wanted to share with us now?
Yes, I had not had my surgery. They canceled it for the second time. So I'm in a lot of pain, and I'm going to say goodbye now.
Okay, well, Charlotte, we hope that your next scheduled surgery takes place and that you feel better between now and then. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you.
You're welcome. For all of us whose joys and concerns remain unexpressed and stay in our hearts, know that this community is thinking about you and we are with you always. And now it's time for our reading, and our speaker today, Eddie Correia, will do that reading for us. Eddie?
Eddie is muted.
Eddie,
This is
you need to either unmute or increase your volume. No, you're muted. But we're not hearing you very loudly, so maybe you'll check your volume. You seem to be unmuted now.
How's that now? All right.
Much
That was-
better.
it was on the master list, not on my computer. But anyway, all right, this is a passage from Luke that's really a good summary of Jesus' theology. Like often he would teach by answering questions from the crowd. So he's talking to a crowd. This is the way it begins, Luke 10:25. And behold, a certain lawyer. And now notice, whenever lawyers are on the scene, there's always some kind of problem. But a certain lawyer stood up and tempted Jesus, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said to him, what is written in the law? How readest thou? And the lawyer answered, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy strength and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. Jesus said to him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. Now notice, there's nothing in that passage about belief in Jesus or belief in anything else. It was love God and love your neighbor. But the lawyer, willing to justify himself, in other words, the lawyer looking for a narrow interpretation, as they always do, said unto Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus answering said, a certain man, and now assume this man is a Jew, went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest, meaning a Jewish rabbi. And when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise, a Levite, and that is really a priest assistant, when he was at the place, came and looked at him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, and it's important to remember, Jews hated Samaritans and vice versa. As he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on
This
him.
is confusing to you.
And he went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. And so Jesus said, which now, this is to the lawyer, which now of these 3 was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And the lawyer said, he that showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said unto him, Go and do thou likewise.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And now let's take a few moments to silently reflect on the words that we have just heard from Eddie about Jesus. I don't have a bell, so I hope that worked, although it was not nearly as pretty as a bell. We here at UUFR are a loving and giving community. Our purpose is to encourage all who gather here to be more generous and compassionate in spirit and in action. All here believe in hope and love and want to work to make the world a better place. UUFR undertakes many activities in our community to realize this worthy goal. We depend on the financial support of the members of this fellowship to make this essential work possible. We cannot pass the basket at this virtual service, so I ask each of you to please give generously online at UUFRVA. Just click on donate. Now it's time, and it's my pleasure to introduce my husband, Eddie Correia, who will speak today about Jesus in part 2 of his 4-part series, Great Religious Leaders. Eddie has been a member of the congregation for a few years and is well known to many of you. He is an attorney in Washington, D.C. He practices antitrust law and also disability law. He's a member of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law and has authored several books, some on spirituality and also a couple of novels. He's a great reader, and I would say a great thinker, and a truly magnificent life partner. So Eddie, we look forward to your talk today on Jesus.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'm going to talk about Jesus today, both Jesus as a person and the Jesus movement that came after Jesus. It's important to distinguish between those two. Jesus was born probably 3 or 4 BCE. He died in his 30s. Most of what we know is based on the four Gospels. It's a challenge to know which stories in the Gospels are literally true and which ones are imagined. They're all very powerful. The tradition of Christmas, of course, is based on the story about Jesus' death. Jesus' birth. But the birth story is only in two books. It's in Matthew and Luke. It's not in the other Gospels, not in Acts. The authors of those other books presumably thought the death wasn't that important. But the Matthew and Luke authors have a beautiful story. Whether it's true or not, it's hard to say. What is written about Jesus as an adult covers only really a few years of his ministry. There were some stories in non-canonical books, that is, books that didn't really make it officially into the New Testament, that describe Jesus as a child and performing miracles. Common for legends to develop about people as children. That was true for the Buddha too. Jesus probably saw himself as offering a more loving, human, less rigid form of Judaism. It's important to remember Jesus was born as a Jew. He was a Jew his entire life and died as a Jew, and no doubt knew all the Jewish traditions. He had what I would say is a simple but very powerful theology. He taught by telling stories, kind of like Abraham Lincoln or the Buddha. Sometimes he would encounter a situation and give his message on the spot. Often he used the Socratic method of teaching by asking questions, as we saw in the story of the Good Samaritan. Another one of the best stories to summarize Jesus' theology is the story about Jesus coming up on the woman who was about to be stoned for adultery. And when he came upon this group, people had rocks in their hands. They were ready to do it. I want to bet there were some men in that group who had committed adultery, maybe even with that very woman. But of course, they're ready to cast the stones. And Jesus said, he who is without sin, cast the first stone. And the crowd went away. And of course, there's the Sermon on the Mount, which is in Matthew, very powerful, beautiful homily. You remember, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth, and so on. Really lovely. In other words, the point of the Sermon on the Mount, everybody who's suffering today, it's going to end, and you will be rewarded. In a nutshell, Jesus' theology was forgiveness, compassion, take care of the poor and other disadvantaged, love your neighbor. Remember that passage in Luke where the lawyer said, well, what does it mean? What do I need to do to be saved? And Jesus said two things. Or the lawyer remembered correctly the two things: love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said nothing about abortion or being gay or euthanasia or celibacy or birth control. He said nothing about how we should feel about people who are Muslims or follow some Eastern religion. He said nothing about the need for confession or for the last rites. Those are all things that came later. They didn't come from Jesus. In the Synoptic Gospels, Mark, Luke, and Matthew, arguably Jesus never claimed to be the divine Son of God. He used the phrase Son of Man several times. Even when he said Son of God, he didn't say the only Son of God. It's the Gospel of John that goes much further in describing Jesus as the only Son of God, and the idea that believing in God, believing in Jesus, is required for salvation. Now, all the Gospels have the resurrection story in them. Everybody's probably familiar with that, or most people. Basic story. Jesus traveled to Jerusalem for Passover. Remember, Jesus, as I said, was a Jew throughout his life. His Last Supper was a Seder. He attracted crowds. He was at the height of his popularity, attracted crowds as he went into Jerusalem. He had certainly attracted the notice of the Jewish authorities and the Roman authorities. He was arrested during the night, taken before the Jewish authorities, then later the Roman authorities. Now, when we're talking about the Jewish authorities, you have to remember Jerusalem was governed by the Roman occupation, and there was a small clique of Jewish leaders that cooperated with the Roman authorities. Think about the Vichy government in France during World War II. It was somewhat like that, the Sanhedrin, not the Jewish community as a whole in Jerusalem or throughout Palestine. Now, counting that first night as the first day Jesus was executed by crucifixion, put in a tomb, and on the third day, the Christian legend is he rose from the dead. Now, this is a critical point in history. What would the followers of Jesus do after his death? Now, based on the Synoptic Gospels alone, you could have assumed that the Jesus followers would have adopted a form of Christianity which is somewhat similar to Buddhism. It would have certainly retained the monotheism of Judaism and would have had a different conception of the afterlife. But beyond that, it would have been Jesus' simple theology of compassion, forgiveness, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. So that's not where the Jesus movement went. Let me turn to it now. The Christianity today is the result of what happened to Jesus and his followers after his death. When Jesus died, not many people would have bet on Christianity becoming the dominant religion in the world, but that's certainly what happened. Today it is 2.4 billion people are Christians. When Jesus died, many of the more educated people in Rome and Greece were starting to lose their belief in the traditional Greek pantheon, later the Roman pantheon, those gods. Some of Greek philosophers, even centuries before, had offered a philosophy that did not rely on any gods, any divine entities. Or if they were willing to concede there were gods, they were like Epicurus felt they didn't really get involved in the world. So it was a critical time in the intellectual development, religious development of the Western world. There's a famous quote by Gustave Flaubert, a French novelist, wrote Madame Bovary. Just when the gods had ceased to be, and the Christ had not yet come, there was a unique moment in history between Cicero and Marcus Aurelius when man stood alone. In other words, if the Roman world had turned to a more spiritual form of religion that did not rely on divinities, did not rely on either the Jewish God or the Roman pantheon, the next millennium might have been very different. Instead, what emerged in the next centuries was the Catholic Church in the Mediterranean area, later in Europe. That's the tradition that was taken to North and South America. That's the tradition. That's why we're Christian in the United States, is because what happened to the Catholic Church. Now, you're going to need to make up your own mind whether that was a good development or not. There were early controversies within the Jesus movement. Keep in mind now, these were Jews who were recruiting non-Jewish people, the Gentiles. And the question was often, should converts have to comply with Jewish law? Particularly the dietary laws and circumcision were big obstacles. I mean, imagine you're making a pitch to a room full of adult men and talking about the merits of converting to Judaism for this new movement, and this awkward problem of the circumcision comes up. For probably good for the Jesus movement, Paul said circumcision was unnecessary. So the Christianity offered life after death. It offered a simple, less complex or less rigid form of theology than Judaism. Very attractive. Those were some of the factors that led to the growth of Christianity. Ultimately, I've talked about this before, what other factors led to the growth of Christianity. Paul was an incredibly effective promoter and organizer throughout the Mediterranean. The early Christians were incredibly devoted. I mean, time after time, stories of being a martyr, unwilling to profess belief in the pagan gods because of their belief in Jesus. That no doubt made an impression on the Mediterranean world. And then organization was very important. They were organized, disciplined, and devoted. And then ultimately, of course, in the 4th century, Constantine became a Christian. Pretty good to have the Roman emperor endorse your religion. And then later Theodosius declared Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire. So by the 4th century, it was the dominant religion in the Western world. What have been the effects of Christianity? There's a lot of good and a lot of bad. Let me talk about the good first. The good is first that hundreds of millions of people have felt a deep sense of purpose in their lives from committing themselves to Jesus. The belief they have either conquered death, or at least death has become much less painful for them and for their loved ones. And hundreds of millions of people have learned in childhood the importance of having compassion for others. And I would say Carolyn and I are two of those. On a social level, the Catholic Church is the largest private provider of health and social services in the world. And there are many other organizations, hospitals, civic groups, other organizations that do enormous good because of Christian principles. So Christianity has done an enormous amount of good. Here are the problems. There are two. The one is a complex theology, and another is what I call the exclusivity problem. So let's start with the theology. If compassion, forgiveness, taking care of the poor and disadvantaged, if that is all the Jesus movement had stood for, it would have been one of the most positive movements in the world. But that's not what it came to stand for. Instead, because of the Catholic Church and the leadership of the Catholic Church, a number of doctrines developed regarding salvation, the nature of Jesus, the nature of life after death, the condemnation of certain personal conduct that didn't conform to the standards of the Church Fathers, particularly in areas of sexuality, issues that Jesus never talked about. There were disputes about very abstract ideas. It's hard to wrap your mind around them even today. The Arian controversy. Jesus' death was followed by arguments over the precise nature of Jesus. Was Jesus there at the beginning of the universe? Or did he come into existence later? Even John 3:16 refers to Jesus as begotten, which suggests that he was born later or came into existence later. Only lawyers and theologians would get tangled up in something like that, but it became enormously important. Council of Nicaea in 325 convened by Constantine to resolve it. You imagine the Roman emperor saying, I want to stick with religion. This religion, I really find a lot in it, but would you theologians resolve some of these abstract arguments? So he had the church fathers in for the council. There's an overwhelming vote to reject the Arian position that Jesus was begotten and somehow secondary. But whenever you're, resolving eternal questions about the nature of the universe through a majority vote, it's a good chance you're not really arriving at eternal truth. Other questions about the incarnation. Was Jesus both human and divine? How could that be? These sound like arguments that would take place in a divinity school, graduate seminar, but they were arguments that led to people burned at the stake. Query whether the average person even understood what the fight was about. The argument about free will and God's omniscience. Since God is omniscient, he must know the future. And since he must know the future, he must know who will be saved. And so who will be saved is already written even before that person was born. That's the reasoning that led to the doctrine of predestination, accepted by Augustine, later rejected by the Catholic Church, incidentally, but at the time, still the Calvinist view. You have nothing to do with it. You have nothing to do with whether you're going to be saved or not. That's already been decided. Pretty ferocious doctrine, isn't it? A great resistance to pleasure in life in general, particularly to sexuality. Augustine, when in writing about Adam and Eve, concluded, this is after months and months of reflection and studying the Bible and authorities, decided that Adam and Eve, it was okay for them to have sex, but only because there was no passion involved in their sexuality. Now, depending on the particular tradition, and it went beyond that, the early Christian approach, and still today, to a large extent, the approach to sexuality has limited or contributed at least to opposition to abortion, to opposition to divorce, to birth control, to gay relationships and gay marriage, things which Jesus never said anything about. This is how Bertrand Russell summarized the intellectual development of the church at the time of after Augustine's death. This is at the end of the 4th century. It is strange that the last men of intellectual eminence before the Dark Ages were concerned not with saving civilizations or expelling the barbarians or reforming the abuses of the administration, but with the preaching of the merit of virginity and the damnation of unbaptized infants. Seeing that these were the preoccupations that the church handed on to the converted barbarians, it is no wonder that the succeeding age surpassed almost all other fully historical periods in cruelty and superstition. Now, let me talk about the exclusivity problem. The exclusivity problem grows out of the complex theology that emerged after Jesus' death. Remember John 3:16? John 3:16 on many Christians' bumper sticker. Let me read it to you. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall have everlasting life. Now, it sounds beautiful in a way until you start examining it. The key, I might say, not a key, but the key to salvation is believing in Jesus as the Son of God. Now, that's not what Jesus said in that passage from Luke I mentioned earlier. That was only two requirements: love God and love your neighbor. But that exclusivity idea, the requirement to believe, has had a lot of implications because it makes the core of the religion turn on a specific belief, the resurrection of Jesus. You talk to progressive Christian ministers today, and you sort of get the idea they really don't believe in the literal resurrection story. They don't really believe that you have to believe in Jesus and as the Son of God to be saved. But what are they going to do? It's not just an article of faith, it's the article of faith. It must be somewhat like Muslims progressive Muslim imams who don't really think the Quran was written by Muhammad as dictated by the angel Gabriel. But what are they going to do? That is the core tradition of Islam. The result is, unfortunately, this idea that my truth is your truth. Now, compare, I spoke about this Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist, very respected man, died just a couple of weeks ago, actually. Here's a quote from him in his book. "I do not think there is that much difference between Christians and Buddhists. Most of the boundaries we have created between our traditions are artificial. It is easy to get caught in the idea that salvation is not possible outside your tradition." It's kind of hard to see a lot of Christian ministers saying the same thing. I know some would, but probably most would not. So let's conclude this way. If you are a Christian or you're attracted to Christian beliefs, and you want to focus on the central, most valuable ideas, then consider, this is a quote from Marcus Borg, who wrote Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time, very powerful book, what I would call put in the category of those progressive Christian theologians. Here's what Borg has to say. "I no longer see the Christian life as primarily about believing. The experiences of my mid-30s led me to realize that the central issue of the Christian life is not believing in God or believing in the Bible or believing in the Christian tradition. Rather, the Christian life is about entering into a relationship with that to which the Christian tradition points, which may be spoken of as God, the risen living Christ, or the Spirit. And a Christian is one who lives out his relationship to God within the framework of the Christian tradition." In other words, you can be a Christian without believing in miracles. Eastern religion, not so much of an emphasis on miracles. The emphasis is on how you live. And that is a path toward Christianity too. The simple message, the simple theology of Jesus is very powerful. Compassion, forgiveness, loving your neighbor, caring for the poor, the importance of how you demonstrate these values, not just to your family or your tribe or people in your religion, but to anyone, even the Samaritan. And one way of describing that way of life is that you believe in the Spirit of Jesus and you carry that Spirit with you. And that can be a wonderful spiritual path. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eddie, very much for a very illuminating and thoughtful presentation. And now, anyone who has a comment or a question for Eddie, please raise your hand, either using your computer if you're on Zoom, or physically raising your hand, and I will call on people as I see that they seek to be recognized. Bob.
Yes, I'm unmuted. One thing that was not mentioned was from the starting in the Middle Ages and almost up to the present, there was this portion of Christianity which said, kill everybody who's not a Christian. The Crusades, if you read about the Crusades and what went on and on, the rivers of blood in the Middle East, if you read about the schisms in the church when the Reformation commenced, many, many years of bloody wars throughout Europe simply over the question of the Christian religion and how to interpret it. And then later this was used to justify enslavement of people, that could be justified in the Bible. And it just seems that this is something that is hard to sweep under the rug and to justify. We just go on and on in our churches, and we've all been to Catholic and Protestant churches, just to ignore that. How did that come about?
Well, it's certainly not inherent in the words of Jesus, that's for sure. The history of the Catholic Church is really a very sad history. I'm going to talk about Martin Luther, and when we get to Martin Luther, all the abuses of the Catholic Church, which led to the Reformation. You heard Bertrand Russell's comment on Augustine. I mean, Augustine, and it's really a brilliant writer and theologian. But you read Augustine and you think, how could the smartest men of the day been focusing on that? And it's quite shocking. However, the good news is there's nothing inherent about Christianity that says that has to continue. I mean, put yourself in the position of Pope Francis. I'm sure Pope Francis is well read on everything we're talking about today and much more. He knows the history of the Catholic Church. He knows the history of the abuses. He knows the struggles. But he's facing a formidable task to try to you can't turn this giant ship, around overnight. You've got to maybe do incremental change in direction. I think that's where he wants to go. And we can just wish him the best of luck.
Joyce, I see your hand up. Did you want to say something? Or is that just your computer?
I would.
Barbara has a question, Carolyn.
Barbara, please.
Yes,
I'm sorry, I don't
I did
have everybody on my screen at once.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just have a question. I want to know, first of all, Jesus never wrote anything. So everything that was part of Christianity now was written years and years after his death. And so many times, sometimes 40, 50 years. Do you think he intended to be worshiped? Or was he just really interested in helping his people? And has all of this been put together? All of this, the Catholic Church put together, just to have sort of a power source or a way of organization or governing, and really it would just a means to an end.
Well, I certainly don't think Jesus intended to be worshipped. You're right. The first gospel, Mark, probably written around 70 CE, about 40 years after Jesus died. And then Matthew, Luke, John being the latest one, maybe 90 to 100 CE, 70 years or so after Jesus died. In a way, I would think Jesus is, first of all, you have to keep in mind that Jesus probably believed that the world was about to come to an end. He talked about the apocalypse and then God on earth, and he sometimes said, those of you who listen to me right now, I'm speaking to right now, you're going to see God's heaven on earth. So he may not have thought the earth was going to last too long. Did he think he was going to be at the right hand of God? I seriously doubt it. We can't blame the whole thing on the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church itself didn't really emerge for what we might say 2 or 3 centuries. It was a Jesus movement that followed. And they knew that Jesus was a very special person. And maybe some of them came to believe that he was truly the Son of God. I could understand that. It wasn't unusual in those days for people to declare that they were divine. The Roman emperors had a tradition of doing that. So that's not very unusual. But where it took us has been unfortunate. A lot of good. Now, I don't want to de-emphasize that. I mean, the church has done enormous good, both socially and at a personal level. It's just done some bad too.
Well, I have an observation about the church and the church hierarchy. It does seem as if the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, at least, and that is not true, I don't believe, in other Christian religions, but the hierarchy has become almost royalty. And when you think about the Jesus message of helping others and generosity and compassion, and then you read about the regal apartments that the leaders of the Catholic Church have in Rome, it really, to me, and I was raised a Catholic and went to Catholic school until I was in college, to me, it not only is it a disconnect, but it makes it very difficult to see how that is the organization that one should look to live a life modeled after Jesus.
Yeah, the Catholic Church, I mean, I don't want this to be a complete session on beating up on the Catholic Church, but unfortunately, they've got a hierarchy. They've got an organization that's not inclined toward modernization. You know, even a corporate, General Motors, as messed up as it is, has a board of directors that ultimately has to be elected by the shareholders. And so there's some system for accountability there. And General Motors can reform itself eventually. The Catholic Church doesn't really have that. It relies on a pope, but the pope has to, who has all the good intentions in the world, it seems to me. Francis has to deal with this incredibly complex organization of cardinals and who oppose him sometimes. And he cannot just decree that the Catholic Church is going to take a radically new direction without causing a lot of problems that who knows where it would go. I mean, I think he's a politician as well as a great religious leader himself. And he knows he's got to do this incrementally, but it's very sad. It's really sad. And I hope the Catholic Church will take a new direction, because the Christian movement, as I say, has brought so much good into the world. If it could just reform itself, that would be even better. Susan has something to say, I think.
Yes, I was muted. Susan, please. Susan, you're still.
I just wanted to say thank you, Eddie. That was a really excellent presentation, and you really did your homework. It was, I just really appreciate it. I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill?
Eddie, I wonder if you could comment on when and to what extent politics became entangled with Christianity.
Well, the modern politics in the US really stem from the abortion decision from Roe v. Wade. And I think that inspired the religious leaders. This is where the evangelicals and the Catholic Church start to merge in their beliefs. that then led to political movements to try to overturn that. And I think it's grown from there. And, I don't begrudge anybody's ability to participate in politics and so forth, including the Catholic Church and evangelicals, and to say what they believe. I think it's been an unfortunate development. Now, a later development beyond that, which is somewhat harder to explain, is the evangelical support for Donald Trump. That's a more complex phenomenon. And one could have all kinds of theories about that, but that's a recent phenomenon. It's been around only since he started running for president.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, Eddie, thank you. And thanks everyone for your thoughtful comments. And now it's time for us to extinguish our chalice. And as we do so, we carry forward our cherished faith, our devotion to each other, and our belief in the dignity and worth of all people. May we act with wisdom and compassion toward ourselves and toward others, so that these virtues may one day be embraced and practiced by all in our nation and around the world. And Eddie, I believe you have some closing words.
I do. Next time we are inclined to condemn someone, either silently in our minds or openly with our words, remember Jesus' words when he came across the woman about to be stoned. He who is without sin, cast the first stone. And next time we're inclined not to care about someone who is different from us, remember the Good Samaritan story and Jesus' point that our neighbors include people we hate. And next time we are searching for a path to follow in our life, consider not the complex theology of Christianity, but the simple and powerful spirit of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Happy Valentine's Day.